They always made it clear that I didn't belong. Not with words, at least not always. Sometimes it was just in how they looked past me, how my name got skipped when ideas were being praised, or how the room always seemed to go quiet when I spoke. Growing up in the Matheson family, it didn't matter what I achieved. What mattered was that I was the youngest and a girl. That combination made me invisible in a house full of loud, proud men. My dad, Gregory Matheson, started our family business before I was born. It was already big by the time I learned to spell my name. My brothers, Andrew, Clay, and Scott, were raised to take it over. Every dinner conversation was about the company. Every birthday came with leadership advice. But when I showed interest, they smiled like it was cute. I remember once, when I was 12, I stayed up all night designing a new logo for one of our product lines. I showed it to Dad the next morning before school. He nodded, said that's nice, and passed it to Andrew. Andrew presented it as his idea 2 days later at a shareholders meeting. Dad loved it. I didn't say a word. That kind of thing happened so often I stopped being surprised. In school I worked quietly. Top of my class, always. I didn't cause trouble. I knew no one was watching, and maybe that helped me focus. I read business books while my friends were watching shows. I practiced pitches in the mirror when no one was home. I even asked to intern at our company when I was 16. Clay laughed. You're not going to waste your summer filing papers, are you? I took the job anyway. And I didn't just file papers. I stayed late, asked questions, watched how things worked. I started noticing problems in our systems that no one else was seeing. But every time I tried to speak up, I got brushed off. Stick to what you know, they'd say. You're still learning. After college, I asked for a role in the marketing department. Not even high level, just a chance to work my way up. They gave me a title with no team, no responsibilities, and an office wedged between the mailroom and the janitor's closet. I didn't complain. I just worked. Quietly, carefully, tracking every issue I found and solving what I could without permission. I stayed late again. I built case studies. I started writing reports for departments that didn't even know who I was. 2 years later, Andrew became interim CEO when Dad stepped back for health reasons. My reports stopped being acknowledged completely. Meetings happened without me. Then one afternoon, I came into work and found my name removed from the office door. They moved me into an actual storage room, no joke. Stacks of toner, dusty shelves, and unplugged mini fridge. That was the new office they gave me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat down, stared at the dusty floor, and made a choice. I quit the next day. No warning. No long goodbye. I left my badge and cleared my desk in silence. No one called to ask why. I wasn't surprised. They didn't need me, and they made sure I knew it. But I wasn't angry. I was done being small. I had some money saved. Enough to survive for a while. I took my mom's maiden name, Rowan, and started from scratch. I didn't want the Matheson name opening doors for me. I wanted to earn it all without anyone's help. The first year was brutal. I pitched dozens of ideas. Got rejected more times than I could count. Lived in a tiny apartment over a grocery store and ate rice and beans for weeks at a time. But I kept pushing. I learned how funding worked. I studied investments like it was a second job. I partnered with 2 people who believed in me, Elena, a strategist, and Marcus, a finance guy with a background in tech. Together, we launched Evelyn Partners, an early-stage investment firm. No one knew who we were at first. But we were sharp. We picked companies others ignored. Clean tech. Women-led startups. Products that worked but didn't scream for attention. Within 5 years, we were managing over $100 million in assets. By year 7, we passed $500 million. Quietly, steadily we grew. All that time, I never used my real last name. Never told a soul I was a Matheson. Not even my closest team. I wanted Evelyn to succeed or fail on its own. And it didn't fail. Then, one afternoon, Marcus came into my office holding a printed news article. You'll want to see this, he said. It was about Matheson Holdings. Their stock had taken a major hit. Leadership shakeups. Project delays. Internal drama. And at the center of it, Andrew. I hadn't thought about my brothers in years. But I read the article all the way through. Twice. A week later, Elena brought me another document. This crossed my desk today, she said. They're seeking emergency capital. Quietly. Discreetly. Looking for partners who can inject at least $200 million. I stared at the company name. Matheson Holdings. I didn't say a word. Just folded the paper and slipped it into my desk drawer. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years. My father. He left a voicemail. Alana. I'm not well. The company's struggling. The family's meeting next Thursday. Come if you can. I think it's time. I sat still for a long time after that. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. I called Marcus and Elena into the conference room. I'm going to that meeting, I told them, but not as their daughter. I opened the file from my drawer. We're buying a majority stake in Matheson Holdings. They didn't flinch. That's why I trusted them. On the day of the meeting, I wore a plain blazer and kept my hair pulled back. No designer purse. No press. I showed up alone, just like I had all those years ago. The receptionist didn't recognize me. You're here for the family session? She asked. I nodded. Hold on. She made a call. A few minutes later, Clay appeared at the end of the hall. His smile was tight. You came. I nodded again. Dad called. He looked me up and down. We're using the boardroom for investors. But you can wait in the back. There's an extra room by the old printer area. A storage room. Again. I didn't argue. I followed him, stepped inside, and sat down on a folding chair. From my spot, I could hear muffled voices from the conference room down the hall. I didn't feel angry this time. I felt ready. What they didn't know was that the investor they were all waiting to impress, the one who could save their sinking ship, was already in the building. Me. And I wasn't here to get even. I was here to take over. I sat in that storage room, surrounded by a broken water cooler and stacks of unused printer paper, and waited. Just like before. The irony wasn't lost on me. Same type of chair, same kind of dismissal. But I wasn't the same woman. I could hear their voices down the hall. My brothers, mostly. Clay's deep baritone trying to sound calm. Andrew speaking too fast, like he always did when he was nervous. Scott chiming in with shallow optimism. They were trying to sound in control. But they weren't. What they didn't realize was that I already knew everything they were hiding. My team had reviewed their books weeks before. Their numbers were worse than public reports showed. 3 straight years of missed projections. A failed overseas expansion. Internal cost-cutting that was eating morale from the inside out. The company wasn't on shaky ground. It was already knee-deep in trouble. They needed cash. Fast. And the only offer on the table was from Evelyn Partners. Which meant, technically me. I hadn't told them. I wanted to see how far they'd go pretending I didn't matter. A few minutes later, a junior assistant came in to bring me a bottle of water. He looked maybe 23, wide-eyed and polite. You okay waiting in here? He asked, glancing around. Sure, I said, smiling. I've waited in worse places. He gave me a funny look, like he couldn't tell if I was serious. They said they're finishing up with prep. Investors are arriving in 30, he added. Thanks. He nodded and left. As the door clicked shut behind him, I stood up and walked over to the corner of the room where the building's central printer console sat. It was still connected to the internal network. I pulled out my tablet and logged into our system at Everlyn. 3 minutes later, a fresh printout slid from the machine. Our final offer. Capital infusion, asset leverage, and proposed leadership terms. The kind of offer you don't make unless you're ready to clean house. I picked up the papers and stared at them for a second. My name, Alana Rowan, sat neatly at the bottom of the signature line. That name had protected me for years. It helped me stay invisible, free from family expectations and old shadows. But now it was time to reveal what had been hiding under it all along. At the exact minute their board meeting was supposed to start, I walked out of the storage room and down the hallway, past the cubicles, past the closed office doors that had once ignored me. I stopped at the glass doors of the conference room. I didn't knock. I walked in. They all turned at once. Eyes blinked. Faces froze. Andrew stood first. Can we help you? I laid the offer packet on the table without saying a word. The room went quiet. Nathan Palmer, the outside consultant they'd brought in to broker the investor deal, was the first to pick it up. This is from Evelyn? He asked, scanning the first page. I nodded. Where's their rep? I looked at Andrew, then at my father, who was seated at the far end of the table, pale and quiet. You invited her to sit in the storage room, I said simply. Clay's mouth dropped open. What are you talking about? I'm Evelyn's founder and majority partner, I said, looking directly at my father. Every dollar of this deal comes through me. Scott laughed under his breath, until he realized I wasn't smiling. Andrew looked like he'd swallowed a rock. That's not possible. Nathan kept flipping pages. This checks out. Alana Rowan is the listed CEO. I've seen her name on filings. You're telling me? My full name is Alana Matheson Rowan, I said, turning toward him. I changed it when I left the company. It was the only way I could be taken seriously. My brothers all started speaking at once. Questions, denials, protests. You're kidding, right? This is a stunt. You just want attention. I held up a hand. This isn't about proving a point. This is about saving your company. Dad finally spoke. His voice was quieter than I remembered. You built this. I nodded. From the ground up. No family money. No favors. Just grit. He sat back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. I couldn't read his face. He looked tired, but not surprised. Andrew leaned forward. You can't do this. We've already started negotiations. With who? I asked. The bank that backed out? The private firm that ghosted your calls last week. Silence. I did my homework, I said. There's no one else coming. I'm the only offer on the table. Scott tried to recover. Okay, fine. Let's say this is legit. What's the deal? Nathan had already reached the last page. He cleared his throat. She's offering full capital support, restructuring the board, and replacing all C-level leadership. You're firing us? Clay snapped. I'm offering you a way forward, I said. You can accept the deal and keep your roles, under a new structure. Or you can walk and I'll rebuild from scratch. Andrew looked like he was going to explode. You think you can just walk in here and take what we've built? I met his stare. You mean what you've run into the ground? My father didn't say a word. Nathan cleared his throat again. If I may, this deal is the only one that keeps the lights on. And frankly, it's better than anything else we've seen. Clay stood up. I'm not taking orders from my little sister. You never have, I said. Maybe that's why we're here. He stormed out. Scott followed, not making eye contact. Andrew stayed frozen. Then he looked at our father. Say something. Dad turned to me. You're really the one behind Evelyn? I am. He gave a slow nod. Then maybe it's time someone else took the wheel. Andrew scoffed. Unbelievable. Dad looked at him. What's unbelievable is that I ignored her for this long. Andrew left without another word. The room was quiet. Only my father and I remained, along with Nathan and two silent board members who had barely moved through the entire meeting. Dad looked at me again. You always were the smartest one. I didn't reply. I just handed him a pen. He signed. He signed without hesitation. No excuses. No delay. Just one stroke of a pen. And suddenly, everything I'd been pushed away from was now in my hands. I looked at him for a long second. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just passed the pen back to me and leaned back in his chair like he was finally letting go of something heavy. Outside the boardroom, I could hear my brothers' voices, muffled, tense. They were pacing in the hallway, probably deciding whether to storm back in or cut their losses. Nathan stood and straightened his papers. We'll finalize the filing and notify the internal teams this week. I'll loop in your legal office. Loop in Elena Torres, I said. She's Evelyn's lead counsel. She'll manage the transition. He nodded. Of course. The other two board members, still stunned, offered quiet congratulations and walked out. I was left alone with my father. He looked smaller than I remembered, less like the booming man who once ran meetings with a raised eyebrow. More like someone who had watched the world shift and finally accepted that he couldn't stop it. You didn't just save the company, he said. You changed it. I didn't do this for you, I replied. Or them. I know. He was quiet for a long time. Then softly he added, I made a lot of mistakes. Especially with you. I didn't respond right away. There were so many things I could have said. So many memories I could have thrown back at him. The storage room, the empty titles, the countless times I was talked over and ignored. But somehow, none of it felt necessary anymore. You let them believe I didn't matter, I said finally. And then you acted like you believed it too. I thought I was protecting the company, he said. Keeping things simple. You were protecting your son's egos. He didn't deny it. I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the door. I'll see you at the transition meeting next week, I said. He gave a small nod. I'll be there. As I stepped into the hallway, Clay and Scott looked up. Their faces were a mix of panic and disbelief. Andrew was nowhere in sight. We're really doing this? Scott asked. We already did, I replied. They didn't follow me. That week, I returned to the building, not as a guest, not as a forgotten daughter, but as the acting CEO. It felt strange at first. The same walls, same offices, same people. But now everyone looked at me differently. The interns nodded with nervous respect. The old HR manager who once forgot my name now stood up every time I walked past. I brought in Elena, Marcus, and 2 department leads from Everlyn. We didn't fire everyone. We evaluated. We listened. We built new systems that made sense, not just ones passed down for tradition's sake. To everyone's surprise, except mine, Scott turned out to be useful. When he wasn't trying to impress someone, he actually listened. I kept him on in operations under Marcus, and over time he stopped making jokes and started asking good questions. Clay resisted everything. He complained about the changes, sulked through meetings, disrupted plans with passive comments and rolled eyes. I gave him time. Then I gave him a choice. Take a severance package and leave quietly, I told him one afternoon in my office. Or stay and report to someone younger and sharper than you. Because it's not going to be you anymore. He chose to leave. Andrew never came back. He sent one email to the board claiming he was stepping away for personal reasons. We didn't push for more. I took his old office. Though not because I wanted the corner view. I just didn't like the idea of an empty space being treated like a shrine to failure. A few weeks into the new structure, I called for a company-wide town hall. Everyone expected it to be formal, polished, rehearsed. I stood on stage and told the truth. I wasn't wanted here. Not at first. Not for a long time. But I stayed quiet and watched, and I learned. I built something of my own, and now I'm back. Not to punish anyone, but to build something better here too. If you're here to work, to grow, to be part of that, then we've got a place for you. If not, this is your time to step away. I didn't promise free lunches or ping pong tables. I promised clarity. And that seemed to be enough. People didn't start cheering. They started working. That Sunday, I went to my parents' house for dinner. My father had asked me in a short voicemail if I'd consider coming. I hadn't stepped foot in that house in almost a decade. When I walked in, my mother hugged me like nothing had happened, and for a moment I let her. She smiled and fussed over the roast like always. My father sat at the head of the table, but didn't speak much. He just watched. Dinner was awkward. There were long silences. Weird half-smiles. Everyone tried to act like we were a normal family again, but too much had changed. After dessert, my father walked me out to the car. I'm not going to ask for forgiveness, he said quietly, but I am going to try to be better. Start by listening more, I said. He nodded slowly. I'm trying. I believed him a little. The company didn't turn around overnight, but we made steady progress. We cut failing projects. We streamlined systems. We found hidden talent in overlooked departments. And within 6 months, our profits stabilized for the first time in 3 years. We rebranded too. Kept the Matheson name, but modernized everything. The logo, the website, even the tone of our communications. For the first time, it looked like a company that belonged in the future. People outside the business started to notice. Press articles called it a surprising revival. No one mentioned me by name at first. Just new leadership. That was fine with me. I wasn't doing this for the spotlight. I was doing it because I could. By the end of the year, everything felt different, not just in the company, but in me. I no longer walked into rooms feeling like I had to prove something. I had already done that, without yelling, without demanding attention, without asking for permission. The building that once made me feel small now answered to me. And somehow, I didn't need it to bow to me. I just needed it to work. We officially merged part of Evelyn with Matheson Holdings under a new division, designed for innovation and sustainable investments. The name on the letterhead still read Matheson, but the decisions behind it reflected the kind of thinking I had waited my whole life to see in this family. My father stepped down completely by spring. He retired quietly, without a party or big farewell speech. One morning he left a handwritten note on my desk that said, "You're better at this than I ever was. I'm proud of you." That note stayed in my drawer. Every once in a while he'd call and ask if I wanted to meet for coffee. Sometimes I said yes. We didn't talk much about the past. There were too many old bruises, and most of them didn't need pressing. Instead, we talked about books. About companies we liked. About leadership styles. He listened more now. I think he knew that was all I ever wanted. Scott became someone I actually respected. He started mentoring interns. He owned up to the things he didn't know and asked questions. We still weren't close, but we worked well together, which was more than I ever expected. Clay moved out of the city. Took a job at a different firm. We haven't spoken since he left, and I'm okay with that. Not all relationships can, or should, be rebuilt. As for Andrew, he eventually reappeared. Not at the company, but in the form of a long email. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it wasn't full of excuses either. He said he realized too late that his version of leadership was just noise. That maybe if he'd stopped talking so much, he might have seen what I was building. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need anything from him anymore. The last piece I had to deal with was me, the girl who had once sat in the corner of meetings, quietly hoping someone would see her. The woman who built an empire in silence, only to walk back into the very place that once erased her. I started going to therapy again. Not because I was lost, but because I didn't want to carry the old weight into the next part of my life. I didn't want bitterness guiding my decisions. I wanted clarity, strength, peace. There were moments, even then, when I'd be walking through the office and I'd glance at the storage room. It was still there. Still packed with toner and unused chairs. No one had changed it. One day, I unlocked the door and walked in. I stood in the same spot where I once sat, years ago, wondering if I'd ever be anything more than background noise in a family built on tradition and control. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt grateful. Not for how they treated me, but for what it taught me. That being overlooked doesn't mean you're invisible. That being underestimated doesn't mean you're weak. And that you don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You just have to own your space when the time comes. I turned the storage room into something new. Not an office. Not a museum of the past. But a mentorship lounge. A quiet space for junior staff to sit, brainstorm, decompress, ask questions. We added a small library. A couch. Whiteboards and post-it notes. I named it the corner room. No one knew what it meant. Except me. It was my way of saying, you are seen. Even if no one says it yet. That summer, we held our first leadership retreat under the new structure. I gave a short talk on growth. Not profits, not expansion, but personal growth. What it means to lead with humility. To own mistakes. To listen without needing credit. And when I finished, people clapped. Not out of duty, but because they meant it. Later that evening, my father joined me on the patio outside the retreat hall. He handed me a glass of water and sat beside me. I almost didn't call you that day, he said. I looked at him. Why did you? I saw your name on the Evelyn file. I wasn't sure if it was you, but I had a feeling. You didn't say anything. I thought maybe I owed it to you to choose. Whether to show up. Whether to speak. You still put me in the storage room. He smiled faintly. Old habits. We were quiet for a while. The air smelled like pine and dust. The sun was sinking low. You know, he said, I used to think power came from being right. From making decisions quickly. From keeping control. And now I think real power is knowing when to step aside. And being proud of who takes your place. That was the closest I ever got to an apology from him. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. As the retreat ended and people packed up to go home, I stood at the edge of the lawn, watching the teams laugh and talk and share ideas. I thought about everything it took to get here. The girl they once sat in a storage room had become the woman shaping the future of the company. But I didn't feel the need to announce that anymore. I didn't want a headline or applause. I just wanted to build something that outlasted me. Something stronger, smarter, kinder. And maybe one day, another quiet young woman would walk through these halls with big ideas and a voice no one heard yet. And when that day came, I'd be there. Not just to listen, but to make sure she never needed to fight for her seat at the table. Because someone already did. And now the table was hers too.